Welcome to this 19th edition of the International Conference on Quality in Education dedicated to the theme of digital transformation of educational systems at the service of quality and equity. I am pleased to welcome Professor Janet Lord from United Kingdom. Hello, Janet.
Hello.
You can start your presentation now.
Thank you. Will you put the slides up, please? Thank you. Thank you very much. So, hello, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to be here speaking to you from Manchester in the UK. It's a bit cold here today, so everybody's wrapped up in jumpers and blankets. My role is Director of Education at Manchester Metropolitan University. And that means that I look after the teaching and learning and the student experience for about 9,000 students, teaching students, nurses, physiotherapists, and so on. Absolutely delighted to do it. Love this work. So if we move on to the next slide, I'll explain what I'm going to talk about today. Thank you. So the title of my presentation is Thinking About a Community of Practice. And this community of practice is something that we built and developed, particularly over the time of the pandemic. And so what I'm going to do today is talk about communities of practice. I'm sure it's a concept with which you're very familiar. We will consider the context in which the Manchester Met Educational Technology Community of Practice operates and has been operating. It's a really successful community of practice. It typically has, there's a core of about 30 members, but up to 100 members at our community of practice meetings. So it's very, very popular. It works very, very well, and we'll think about why. Could we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So if you've heard about communities of practice, you will of course have heard of the work of Etienne Wenger, who's done so much work on this area. And there's all kinds of books. That's one of the main books that I've put a picture of there that Wenger wrote. Communities of practice are really interesting because they're formed by people who engage in collective learning. And I think as educators, we're very interested in collective learning and in a shared domain of human endeavour. So I've put some examples on the slide there for you. It might be a tribe learning to survive. It might be some pupils defining their identity in a school as a particular subculture. It could be a network of hospital surgeons trying to find new techniques and exploring them. Or it might be first-time managers who are working together to try and find out how best to cope in their world. The key thing about it is that it's collective learning and that shared domain of human endeavour. The next slide, please. Thank you. So there's a picture of Etienne there. I'm very lucky to have been able to work with Etienne when I was at the University of Manchester here in the UK, very inspirational person. And so a community of practice has three key aspects, if you like. The first is the domain, which is the area of shared interest and the key issues that are involved. So for a tribe learning to survive, it might be about survival, it might be about food, shelter, those sorts of things. Then in terms of the community, the relationship, that's about the relationships that are built as you work together through discussions, through activities, through learning. So the colleagues that I'm working with, and I know you all work with, you build those relationships as you talk about your work and as you do the work together, you build that community. And those are both linked to practice. That's the kind of body of knowledge, the methods, the stories, the history, all the tools that have been developed in that domain, in that area. So those are the three main areas of that. The next slide shows a quote from Etienne and his wife Beverly. And this is a nice quote. This is really quite a simple quote, and it's something that really encapsulates what it is about a community of practice. And it says, communities of practice are groups of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do, and they learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. So one of the things that at the Manchester Met EdTech COP, we interact regularly, we all share a passion for educational technology, and as a result of sharing knowledge and experiences, we've done it better. So this slide now shows what kind of questions you might want to ask if you were thinking of setting up a community of practice. And these are the kinds of questions that I asked when I first set up the Manchester Met EdTech COP. Looking at domain, what are we all about? Well, we're about educational technology, but that's massive. What does that mean? How relevant is that to our work? Does it matter? Is it important enough? Those kind of questions. Moving on to look at practice, what do we know? We knew that as a group, we knew a lot of things. What knowledge did we have to share? What haven't we got? What do we write down? What do we do? And then in the community, who are the key players? Who are the leaders? Is there a leader? What are our relationships about? How does our interaction work? So those are some really important questions to ask about domain, community, and practice in relation to a formal community of practice. Thank you. Next slide, please. So what, I guess? So what is that if you have a community of practice, you are participating in something that shapes what you do, but more than that, who you are, so your identity, and how you interpret what you do. You see it through a different lens in that particular case. You're seeing things differently. So because we've got a community of practice that works on educational technology, of course, that shapes what we do. But also it's made me start thinking much more about how I'm an educational technologist as well, as a lecturer, a teacher, a manager, a leader. But also the narrative, how I interpret what I do, the narrative about my role, and how important the community of practice has foregrounded so much of my work and made it important in terms of digitally enhanced learning, teaching, and assessment. So if we look at the next slide, it will talk a little bit about the domain. So the domain that I first talked about a couple of slides ago was the area of shared interest. Well, so it's not just a load of friends who might go out together, or it's not just a network of connections. It has an identity. So when we have an educational technology COP, the membership implies a kind of being in that community of practice, or COP, implies a commitment to that domain and a shared competence that distinguishes you. So people now at my university come to me and say, Janet knows about that area. So it is an expertise in a university, but it might not be. And I put an example on there about a youth gang. They have a different set of expertises about surviving on the street and developing identity. But in any community of practice, it's really important that what happens is that collective competence is valued and that we learn from each other. So it may be, as in the case of the youth gang, that other people might not value or recognise that expertise. But certainly at the university, my expertise and the expertise of the members of my community of practice and the community of practice, and I'm talking about it as if it's mine because I started it, but it's not mine really at all. The expertise is valued within the university. That's very, very important. So that's the domain. If we move on, we'll look at the community. If we can have the next slide, please. Thank you. So in the community, it is, as we said, not just about going out together. It's about joint activities and discussions, helping each other and sharing information. So, for example, as we're coming up to our winter break, excuse me, and for some people, for Christmas, what I'm doing is I'm going to run a festive session of our community of practice. And people are excited because we're going to review the work that we've done this year. We're going to have a bit of fun with a quiz. We're going to find some information out about helping each other. We're going to have a big discussion about peer-to-peer support in relation to technology-enhanced learning. We're doing that because as we have already built relationships that enable us to learn from each other, and we continue those relationships, and we care about the community of practice and each other. So there are some examples there of what might not be a community of practice. So a website isn't in itself a community of practice. Our educational technology COP has got a community of practice website, but that's not the community of practice. That's different. Having the same job doesn't necessarily make for a community of practice unless you interact and learn together. So I work with other directors of education. We learn and work together. We are a community of practice. And it may be that the staff or students in a college or university have got a lot in common, but until you're engaging in that process of collective learning, you don't form a community of practice. So let's think about practice, because that's the key word, isn't it? So you can't be a community of practice. You're not a community of practice if you just happen to like watching old black and white films. A community of practice is about practitioners. So members of a community of practice have a shared bank of resources. There would be stories we tell. I'm sure when you meet colleagues and friends, you've got those stories, those narratives, those experiences, those shared understandings. And one example is teaching, many years of teaching. And I've got those stories, I've got those tools in my repertoire. And when I get together with other teachers, other university lecturers, I share those in the community of practice. In terms of educational technology, one of the reasons we set up our educational technology community of practice was precisely so that we could share the experiences, the stories, the tools, so that somebody could say, did you not know we could do it that way? We could do that. So it's about that sharing, and we are practitioners, and practice is key. So it might be that you sit next to somebody on a plane and you might have a really good chat with them. And that's a really good conversation, but that doesn't in itself make for a community of practice. If we move on, it's interesting to think about the development of shared practice. If you think about your own practice, either in education or perhaps in educational technology, it might be deliberate. So I've put an example there. The engineers of windscreen wipers at a car manufacturer, they try and pull together. They say, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Oh, that's a good idea. They pull together information, trick stories into a knowledge base deliberately, and they save it somewhere, maybe, where they say, oh, no, when that problem comes up, we do this. But teachers, let me say educators, who perhaps meet regularly for lunch, they perhaps think they're just sharing a sandwich or a bowl of soup, but they may not realize that they're a community of practice, because as they talk about their practice, what they've done, they're sharing those stories within that shared domain, and they're sharing about their sources of knowledge. And that's that shared repertoire for practice for the community. So it might be intentional, as it is with the windscreen wiper engineers, or it might not be intentional, as I've suggested with the teachers or the university lecturers there. So if we move to the next slide, you can see it said, so there's a picture there of a French impressionist cafe. Members of community of practice don't necessarily work together on a daily basis. The Manchester Met Educational Technology Community of Practice is made of people from academia, professional services, administrators, and so on. And although we do work together, the university is very large. There are 4,000 members of staff and 40,000 students. We don't see each other on a daily basis. And the same was true of the impressionist painters. They met very often, but not every day, to discuss their painting. Those interactions were really important, but they didn't set up all their easels together and paint together. They had those interactions, shared the tools, shared the repertoires, and then went off and did their own thing, probably painting on their own somewhere. So if we think about that in relation to educational technology, and I've just put one definition of educational technology there, and that links to practice. the study and ethical practice, so it's really important that we think about that, of facilitating learning and improving performance by creating, using and managing technological processes and resources. So we're all now very much becoming a lot more familiar with educational technology. But let's have a little think about the pandemic. So if we move on, please. Thank you. In the pandemic, what we found a lot of times in the UK and people in other countries that I've talked to is that there was a sudden explosion of technology. Microsoft made a lot of money because they suddenly sold Teams to a huge number of organizations and people. The technology went, I like to think of it, charging off at 100 miles an hour down a motorway. The technology was there. But I can remember the day that we locked down in the UK and somebody said, you will be teaching on Teams from now on. But nobody really knew anything about it. They didn't know how to work Teams, and they certainly didn't know anything at all about online pedagogies. And as I've put there, teaching online is just simply not the same as teaching face-to-face, but you've turned a camera on. Teaching online requires a set of different pedagogical skills, a set of different ways of working. And as well as that, we missed out, and I'm sure everybody's aware of this, during the pandemic, on those kind of corridor conversations and underground working that contribute so much to what we do. So that kind of, oh, I've seen you on the corridor. Don't forget that so-and-so's not very well. Those kind of things, those chats, the coffee before a meeting, those kind of things, they're very, very difficult to recreate digitally. So we were in a bit of a mess, I think, in many ways. In 2019, then, we set up the university-wide community of practice on EdTech. And the idea of that COP was that it was open to everybody in the university. So I'm hoping that all 4,000 members of staff don't come, but if they did, they'd be very welcome. The purpose of the community of practice was to give the members the chance to develop their practice and their thinking about educational technology. They talk about teaching, they talk about pedagogical research, they talk about other educational projects. So, for example, I set up a project across the university where I now source 5 apps for teaching and learning, like Nearpod, Mentimeter, and so on, that everybody in the university has access to and we pay for and support centrally. I use the community of practice as a kind of pilot, somebody to talk to, people whose ideas were there, and we worked together to do that. So we were sharing our knowledge, our experience in that community in the same domain to affect our practice. And we shared lots of examples of practice and theory into practice as we've worked over the last 3 years, but particularly in the pandemic, on educational technology in general. So what's our COP like? Well, this is really interesting. If we look at the next slide, we can see that I've put one of the things that I asked people to do was to say, what's your identity in relation to EdTech? And you can see in the middle there, Emily said, well, my EdTech identity is a sort of online explorer. Underneath her, Kate has said, my EdTech identity is optimistic. And they put their own goals on there as well. And you can see at the top there, I mentioned we were going to have a Christmas get-together in a couple of weeks' time, a festive get-together. That was we have a festive get-together as well. So it's quite informal, as you can see from that. What's key about it, in my view, is it's absolutely authentic. So although I tend to organise the meetings, or my PA organises the meetings, although I organise the meetings, actually the community of practice belongs to everybody. I'm not the boss of it, I'm the facilitator of it. So it is flat. Everybody in the community of practice has the same status, if you like. Nobody's better or bigger or more important than anybody else. It's always fun. We use each other as a sounding board in relation to our practice, and we engage in co-constructed aims and activities. So I always say to people, what would you like us to look at now? Okay, we're going to do that. And then we work that kind of thing through together. So one of the really important things is shown on the next slide, which is just that it is absolutely non-hierarchical. So we have technicians, we have senior professors, we have deans, we have administrators, and everybody's opinion is valued in the same way. And part of that is about, if you look at the next slide, you may be familiar with the work of John Law in relation to mess. We knew it wasn't going to be something that was very structured and had to be spontaneous. And that's been a really good way for us to develop our practice in this domain as a community. And so the notion of mess, I think, is really, really important. So you might be thinking now, as we move on and look at the next slide, perhaps you are already in a community of practice, perhaps you know you are, perhaps it's called a community of practice. If it's not called it, it might still be one. And would you like to be in a community of practice? And if so, I would suggest to you that a community of practice in relation to educational technology, particularly as it can be facilitated online really, really easily, has been something which for us has been absolutely transformational in terms of our identity, our practice, and our community. So some of the features are on that slide. I've put some other features on the next slide as well. And the important things here about a grapevine, we're talking to each other, common stories, inside jokes, awareness of each other's strengths. I can't do programming, but I know I've got lots of people in my EdTech COP who can do programming. They aren't pedagogical experts, but I am. We've got this commitment to it, and we've got a common way of seeing the world through educational technology and pedagogy as a lens, which is really, really great. So some of the features there. So to finish with, I've put my email address on the next slide. I would be really happy to continue this discussion. If anybody is interested, would like to talk in more detail about how to set up a community of practice, anything like that, please do let me know. Please do drop me an email. I'd be absolutely delighted to hear from you. It would be very exciting for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Janet Lord, for your presentation. Very interesting presentation about community of practice in educational technology and the importance of these tools to strengthen the relationship between practitioners in the field of technological of education. Thank you so much again. And now I am pleased to welcome Dr. Mohammed Ali Akour. Dr. Akour. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think we just had a little communication.
Nice to meet you, and thank you to join us in this conference. We will be pleased to hear you and to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Doctor. My name is Muhammad Ali Akour. I am an instructional psychologist and technologist. Currently, I'm an independent consultant and a former university professor. Today, we will be talking about, a framework that I have developed along with a friend of mine from India, Dr. Anabas Das. Should I upload the presentation or you're going to upload it, Doctor? Looks like.
Please do it if you want.
Okay. 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 There we go.
It's okay.
Now, all right, that's good. Uh, Presentation topic. Before that, yeah, is it clear right now? Okay, good, good, good. I just want to make sure that we have good communication. Thank you. Presentation topic: digital transformation of higher education system and e-learning system framework vision for 2032. I want to take this opportunity and thank Dr. Abdul Nasser Naji, who is the head of Amakin and also the 19th International Conference on Equality in Education, for this honorable invitation. I want to start my presentation today with two quotes from quotes related to the presentation topic. The first one, which is educating the mind without educating the heart, is no education at all. And the second one, which is be a free thinker and don't accept everything you hear as truth. Be critical and evaluate what you believe in. What is the digital transformation of an educational system? Digital transformation of an educational system is the process of transforming the system's operations and products using digital technology to enhance and optimize the environment of teaching and learning. Examples of digital transformation include the development of educational websites, learning management systems, and information technology modernization like cloud computing. Digital education refers to the application of digital technology resources in teaching and learning. Online learning, mobile-based learning, and computer-based learning are examples of digital learning. Digital education utilizes a combination of information technology, digital content, and instruction. What are the advantages of digital education? The advantages of digital education include the following: personalized learning, gamification, self-directed learning, easier to access or easy access, self-paced learning, blended learning, collaborative learning. What are the challenges of digital education? The challenges of digital education include the following: equal and equality access to technology, adequate infrastructure, resources, and support, government and institutions, readiness and support. Current online learning systems can substitute for the traditional teaching and learning methods. There are four important steps necessary to adopt digital transformation and digital education. First, analysis of the internal and external settings. Second, development of goals and plans. Third, implementation of goals and plans. And then fourth, results, evaluation, and revisions. COVID-19 pandemic impact on internet usage. After the worldwide spread of the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdowns to contain it, it became evident that access to the internet was urgent and in many cases critical. According to the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, During the COVID-19 pandemic, internet user ranks grew to 4.9 billion in 2021 from 4.1 billion in 2019. Remote education, remote work, and remote health services came within the reach of many. However, approximately 2.9 billion people, 96% of whom live in developing countries, remain without internet access and risk being left behind by the digital revolution. United Nations Sustainable Development Goals report. According to UNESCO, in 2020, 90% of learners, 1.58 billion children and youth from primary to higher education in 200 countries worldwide were affected by the pandemic by mid-April 2020. The unprecedented challenge required all of the world education institutions to move quickly, attempting to switch to online learning. At the beginning, the online option was not available to everyone because not all students, sorry. At the beginning, the online option was not available to everyone because not all students had access to the internet, required devices, and also proper support. Afterward, the online learning became the new norm and more accepted worldwide, but with many challenges and limitations. For example, the current online learning systems cannot fully substitute for the traditional teaching and learning methods. To address these challenges and limitations, we will witness many rapid advances in educational technology framework designs and developments and innovations in the next 10 years. Many of the developments are already underway. For example, one novel conceptual framework called, or by the name, Virtual Smart Total Learning Environment, VSTLE, with many intelligent models, has been designed and proposed by the presenter and my colleague, Dr. Anubham Das. The first version of this framework was presented and published by the IEEE TALE 2020 conference. It focuses on transforming all of the traditional and online teaching and learning experiences environment into one intelligent teaching and learning system environment. It is designed in such a way that minimum human tutor intervention will be needed for its functioning and to humanize technology to bridge the gap between humans and the proposed system. It has many automated and intelligent models, including student, tutor, content, contest, instructional, predictive, and adaptive models. In the second version of the framework, more needed models were added in the design to enhance and optimize the system, including multiple languages translations, voice user interfaces, emotion intelligence, artificial intelligence, eye tracking, artificial intelligence, and assessment and quality assurance models. This framework is the outcome of extensive research reviews and the vast e-learning experience of the researchers. It is designed to rise to the occasions to use the latest technology along with the emerged technologies like 5G, etc., to transit physical and social borders. Also, it is designed to be highly smart, independently managed. The comprehensive teaching and learning environment that incorporate all possible latest technologies like big data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence and cloud applications. It will include features like cutting-edge personalized e-learning, anomaly detection, nearly total operations automation, student performance monitoring, and immediate guidance, automated dynamic intelligent content preparation and updates, students interaction and monitoring, smart automated academic advising and counseling, smart automated quality assurance monitoring and updates. So virtually, it is going to be doing a lot of work to the point where maybe human resources will be at minimum. Summary: COVID-19 pandemic affected the internet usage and the need for advanced development in the digital technology field to enhance remote education, remote work, and remote health services, etc. The proposed framework is the result of extensive research and study. It is a conceptual framework that is utterly smart, and it will endow with the total learning environment to the learners. We are still relentlessly working on this framework and optimistic that the application of it will be in actuality in the education arena in an extremely diminutive time. And thank you for listening and for being there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohammed, for your interesting presentation, which showed advantages of digital education, its challenges, how to adopt it, and the components of virtual smart total learning environments. Thank you so much. To end this fourth session, thank you for your excellent contribution to our conference, and don't forget to connect just in 20 minutes in order to follow the next step of CIMQUSEF 19. Goodbye.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you, doctor. Thank you, thank you.